right, so this is my home. This is where I live.
In December 2017, Thomas Cochran was preparing to take off in his van, hoping to enjoy a break from his job as a seasonal firefighter.
And I get a call from my brother, like, hey, there's a fire down in Ventura. And I'm thinking, no, you guys are fine. You live in a city, like, what are you worried about? So I started texting some buddies down in Ventura, and they tell me, yeah, this thing's bad, like, it's coming right towards the city.
Fires impacting down into the city of Ventura.
Get top of the tree!
He drove 2 hours down the California coast to his parents' home.
Initially, I told my parents, like, I'm gonna stick around for 10 minutes just to see what it does. I'll be right behind you. I had a hose in the back and a hose in the front, and I was at this point just making laps around the house, just putting out small starts, putting out trash that was on fire. And just one by one, the homes started catching on fire. And it was just a shower of embers. Black, thick smoke, just rows of homes on fire.
Operations, engine 68. We've got at least 50 structures well involved at this time.
I wasn't able to take a break for 2 nights until I'm like, okay, I think the house is safe now. Yeah, here's where we almost lost our house. I was underneath at the time. I looked up and I saw it was on fire. My dad didn't want to replace the wood. He wanted to leave it as a memory. That's how the whole neighborhood looked. It looked like a war zone.
Surrounded by the scars of the Thomas Fire, he confronts the new normal.
I had worked 6 seasons of fire and basically seen every season be worse from the last. My first season, I was only employed for 3 months. And then the second season, it was 7 months. And then every season after that, I was employed for 9 months. Fire season in California is pretty much year-round.
These wildfires are supercharged by climate change, record heat, and periodic drought. It's a deadly combination.
Ventura County is actually the fastest warming county in the continental United States. 2 degrees Celsius is this kind of threshold, that's the point of no return. And so our county is actually already, since pre-industrial levels, warmed over that 2 degrees.
Lucas Zucker is a community organizer focusing on how climate change affects the most vulnerable, like the immigrant workers who pick the strawberries and other produce in Southern California.
Folks are out there already really in really difficult conditions, and climate change certainly makes that worse. If it's 90 degrees out, it's like, over 100 under those tents, right? It's kind of a greenhouse effect, and when you're working under them, it's super hot. I think in a lot of ways, immigrant workers are really on the front lines of climate change, whether that's working in farms or other outdoor industries like, landscaping and construction. When your work is dependent on the elements, that creates a lot of economic insecurity.
During the Thomas Fire, many of the farm workers weren't evacuated. Instead, they were sent into the fields.
A lot of the agricultural companies were wanting to harvest their crops quickly to keep them from being damaged by ash or smoke. They had thousands of workers out there, picking often without any kind of protective masks, doing 10 hours of hard labor in the fields. That disaster really exposed to people the harsh edge of climate change. It's not till the Titanic's going down that you really see who gets the last lifeboat.
Whenever there's waves, I try and get out there. You just step into the ocean and you immediately feel like you're in nature. Things are a lot slower, a lot quieter, and for all the power and energy that exists out there, there's a lot of stillness.
An avid surfer, Graham Hamilton intimately feels what's changing and what's being lost due to global warming.
We know what's happening. The beaches are disappearing, infrastructure is crumbling. Within the next few decades, if sea level rise projections continue apace, California is looking to lose some 80% of their existing surf breaks. I'm not a scientist, but I would argue that we are well beyond the tipping point. Entire ecosystems are going belly up.
If he can just get people in the water, Graham's convinced they'll see what he sees and feel what he feels.
There's no agenda beyond getting them on a board and in the water and smiling, to get people to kind of open themselves up to their connection to these living systems that we all depend upon.
Graham's a member of Surf Rider and helps organize monthly beach cleanups.
That's a typical cleanup at Sunset Beach. We average about 600 pounds per session. We're at the beach to remove trash. But equally, if not more importantly, is to get the people who are cleaning the beach to connect the dots between the things that they're removing and the things that they might be using in their everyday lives. It's very difficult to care and step through that first door and not step through the second or the third or the fourth or the fifth. I've been involved for over 10 years now, and I'm still learning things about who we are, where we are, who's come before us, who's coming after us, and what our responsibility is.
There's a waterfall and an ice sheet and a river.
When Laura Tenenbaum worked at NASA, she visited the ice fields of Greenland.
My other camera.
She was there to measure the rapid melting of the glaciers due to global warming.
This is 200-foot high wall of 100,000-year-old ice.
This is crazy. Here, can you see it?
I looked off to my left, and that's where the ice sheet is. In front of me, this river melting, that's now. And if I look to my right, I can see down the rivers off to the fjord, and that's the future, which is sea level rise. It took my breath away.
Back in her hometown of Los Angeles, extreme heat, wildfires, and drought are all part of the new normal.
A common question that people used to ask was, when is climate change going to start happening? Of course, now nobody asks that question because it's so obviously already happening.
The last decade was the hottest ever, and Laura sees the effects firsthand in her garden.
Avocado tree right here. The whole top, it didn't burn in the sense of it was on fire. The tops of the trees burned as though they were in an oven.
People are afraid. How bad is it going to be? Are we all going to die? So you got to take care of yourself. Then you got to spend time doing something, feeling like you're going to make a difference.
A neighbor across the street, he's like, what are you doing? And this is the guy who'd chopped down his tree and drove a big SUV. And he's like, oh, I want to learn how to garden too. And now you see, now that person across the street is doing it, and then somebody over there is doing it. I mean, you think in your mind, it's just a trick that your mind is telling you that it's not enough. But you don't know where your energy is going to end up. You don't know where your effort is going to make a difference for somebody else. There's no way to tell. So you just have to do it.
Laura spends her time writing articles and giving talks about climate change, looking for signs of hope wherever she can find them.
I found a leaf on a walk just 2 days ago. It was a dead leaf, but it had these sprouts growing out of it. So I picked it up and I threw it in the soil, and it's already growing. All that stuff is growing out of it. It's so crazy. Like, it's death, but it wants to live. I love it. And it's already started like having roots. So it's just like, I don't know, I'm obsessed with that thing. I visit it every day. We have to remember what we're fighting for. You know, that little dead leaf is fighting to live as much as you or I. It's a long war battle, so we have to start to enjoy fighting. And we may lose, there's no guarantee. We could all go extinct. The human race will go extinct someday, maybe soon. We may take a bunch of stuff down with us too. But why not fight it as best as we can for as long as we can, as determined as we can? Why not?
Turn right here on Pleasant Valley.
Lucas Zucker tracks the impact of climate change and environmental collapse, a painful reality that's hard to ignore here.
When it was originally developed like this, I think they thought like, oh, maybe the ocean wind will like blow away the pollution. You wouldn't see this on the beach in Santa Barbara or Malibu or, you know, some of the kind of wealthier California beach towns, right?
This low-income community on the California coast has become a dumping ground.
So they just kind of dumped this big mountain of toxic waste here for like decades. Walked away and it's just sitting here.
The beach is largely abandoned, flanked by a busy port and a power plant.
Historically, a lot of our fossil fuel power plants have been concentrated in low-income communities and communities of color. Communities who, like here in Oxnard, actually are producing energy often for more affluent communities. Seeing in my own community that level of injustice, it feels like being a canary in a coal mine.
Despite this, Lucas refuses to give up.
You have to have a deep love for your community to struggle against some of the biggest corporations in the world. It's not going to be like in the movies where there's one superhero that comes in and saves us. Something like the ecological crisis we're dealing with now, it almost calls on everyone to be a little bit of a superhero.